Okay, we're here again with Dr. Tim Atkinson from Virginia, and we're here to talk a little bit about a couple of things, but first off, he has some interesting stories in regard to giants. We know from Scripture that there were giants in the earth in those days, going back to the 6th chapter of Genesis, and also we find that in the time of Moses, they killed off a bunch of giants that were ruling and oppressing the people in the land of Gilead and up around Mount Hermon and south and on into Canaan. And then even in the time of David, we know the great well-known story of Goliath and his 4 brothers who were part of a giant family. And so, anyway, there's a little evidence we find that giants have existed for a long time and perhaps even today, but certainly there is an archaeological evidence that says the same thing. So, without further ado, this is Dr. Tim Atkinson, and tell us how you, a little background first of all, how you came to, with this information.
Well, I was just one of those kids growing up that, read Genesis chapter 6, and that there wasn't too much on it. And really, we went to a church in those days that it was kind of a forbidden subject, couldn't really say too much. And when it came to believing in David and Goliath, we believed that, but they really kind of denied the existence of giants other than that.
So you say that basically Christians think that giants are okay. The subject is okay as long as we keep them safely in the past.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, give them a beanstalk.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just something I had a casual interest in, and then I got to know Dr. Carl Baugh, the creation scientist, and he'd been going on dinosaur digs for quite a number of years, and he was talking about the different dinosaurs that he dug up, and he had run into giants, giant footprints, and things like that. In fact, they discovered a giant footprint in Texas right on a riverbed. And they were like, this big, which is pretty good size.
Let the record show that's about 18 inches, huh?
Could be.
Something like that.
So he invited me to 2 dinosaur digs. The first one was a private dig that was in the Four Corners. And we found some interesting things there, but no giants. And then he invited me later that year to one that he did down in Texas. And that's the one that they had seen evidence of giants before in the fossil records. And so I was really excited. I kind of am interested in archaeology and paleontology anyway. And so we went, and I was expecting, I get to just go out and enjoy myself. I don't have to give any meetings or anything like that, kind of be a little different deal. But what happened was when we started digging, all these older folks had pains from not using their bodies for 20 years. And so Dr. Baugh would bring them by me, and they say, this is so-and-so, and he can't move. He needs a little help here. So can you do the quantum alignment on him? And so I'd get stuck doing that, and it ended up everybody else was digging but me. And but we did manage to find a big footprint of a giant. And in fact, on my old phone, I have pictures of Carl and my partner Dave Leggett and myself in front of that picture, and it was really it really turned out good. And then when we called the officials They, of course, just poo-pooed it and wouldn't show up. And, they could have had it named after them if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. But they just were so opposed to it, you would have think they went to my church when I was little. And, there just was all kinds of evidence that these things really, we took it right out of the fossil records. It wasn't something you could go there the night before and make, and then claim that was and that's what the so-called scientists were saying about us, that we were just conjuring this stuff up. And so that was my first real experience with seeing things like that. And then Dr. Baugh explaining how things happened and so on and so forth. And the riverbed where the fossils were was when the flood came. It was during that time that all this was going on and happening. And so we got a little bit of an education on how that worked. And then in my travels, traveling particularly in Mexico, we did a lot of discovery work with pyramids. And so we were around pyramids, and the Mexican people really have a lot of good stories about things that they have seen with the pyramids and UFOs and all that kind of stuff. And so we were busy just kind of doing our work in agriculture with the energy, and these things would just keep coming at us every once in a while, So I had some guys that worked for me part-time that were farmers, and they discovered a field that ended up having a bunch of giants, skeletons in them. And before I could get down there, the military came and confiscated all the giants.
Oh, they must have been delighted to see all those giants and want to publish them and name them after them.
Well, they kind of disappeared.
Oh, they disappeared?
Yeah, they didn't like them very much, I guess. They didn't want anybody else to see them.
They didn't like them any more than Christians did, huh?
Yeah, and what was real interesting is they had cone heads, the pointed head, and the average size was about 9.5 feet, which that doesn't sound too much bigger than us, but let me tell you that it's enough to double the weight and things like. So they'd be about a 400-pound person. That's pretty big. Mm-hmm. So they also had artifacts, and the artifacts were really neat. And when the military came to take away the skeletons, all they did was take away the skeletons, but they left all the artifacts. Thought that was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. They weren't really interested in them, huh?
No. And what was interesting about that was the artifacts were made out of a stone material, none of which was indigenous to this world. So we don't know where it came from. But they were very, very heavy. They were oversized. The masks that they had were like 30 pounds, and they were pretty heavy. They had shields. The shields laid on top of the skeletons in this burial cemetery kind of thing, and they were 110 pounds each. And they had very intricately carved things on them that kind of told a story. And some were pictures of the giants and, in a throne room kind of setting. And there were people there and big snakes and a little bit of everything. But you could really make it out good. The biggest and best one that we found, I do not have a picture of. They were kind of scared to show that one because it had 7 UFOs on it. And these are maybe thousands of years old. Why would they be on there,
Like discs? disc-shaped something.
And two of my friends actually got hired to clean the pyramids on the inside. And they were busy cleaning, and they went into one room, and there was a UFO sitting in there.
Now, just to clarify, some people think that Egypt is the only place where pyramids exist, but actually there's a lot of them in Central America, in Mexico, and other places around the world too.
And they're bigger.
Even bigger.
Yeah.
Not as big as Great
The
Pyramid.
biggest stuff is found in Mexico.
Bigger than the Great Pyramid even? Do you think? Wow. Amazing. I'll have to get down there and take a look at some.
They're step pyramids instead of the smooth-shaped ones. But they have quite a civilization there with the Mayans and the Incas and the different people groups.
Interesting.
So when I asked them if they took pictures so we could see the UFO, in the pyramid, they did not take a picture. They got out of there and did not go back.
A little skittish, huh?
It really frightened them. We've also seen statues where the person that represented the statue had 6 fingers and 6 toes, which is
sounds biblical to me.
Yeah. So that was pretty exciting. You got to realize that Antiquities has laws against even having these things. So they had to be real careful to not show it to the wrong people. And, I'd like to have a museum and be able to collect things and all that kind of stuff. But the Smithsonian has collected skeletons for 100 years. And just recently, due to I can't think what the name is, where they have to say what they have.
Yeah, kind of disclosure of some sort.
Yeah. And they admitted that they had over 100,000 skeletons that they destroyed.
Destroyed?
So we have that no more. But people used to turn those kind of in for about 100 years. And that's something that gets turned in and then it disappears.
Do you really think they destroyed them? Or do you think they just moved them and hid them?
I think they hid them. Just put them in...
I can't quite see them shoveling them off into an incinerator and destroying them when they would know that they might prove useful at some other time. There's a lot of things that disappear, and supposedly destroy.
And there's some books of the Bible that really say a lot more about the giants than what Genesis chapter 6 says. And things like the book of Enoch, which has quite a bit of giant information in it, including a story that the giants went to Enoch and tried to get him to talk to God about letting them stay alive. And God did not let them, but they wanted a second chance. And because they were born of rogue angelic beings, there's some kind of law that God laid down that they could not do that. So there are a few books that have not been included in our Bible. However, they remain in the area of the eastern part of the world with the Church of the East, which is the church founded by Thomas in about 49 A.D. And they still have those books, Book of Enoch, Book of Jubilees, and Jasher, and things like that. And Book of Jasher was talked about in at least 2 books of the Bible, but they took it out. And I've read that. I've read the Book of Enoch and Jubilees, and I really don't see anything wrong with it. But what they think is the Western church did not want people to know too much about giants existing, because they were kind of the rulers of a lot of these different civilizations, like land of Canaan and so on and so forth. So, it's just like they tried to deny the existence and kind of play it down.
Mm-hmm. So, in regard to these, giants in the New World over here, I know that there's been reports of various things along this line in regard to or connected to the Grand Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be connections with Egypt there as well, huh?
Yeah, in 1905, there was an expedition to the Grand Canyon where they found a large cave that had once housed a civilization from Egypt, and they had many, many artifacts from Egypt, including a cryptogram that said that Joseph had been there 12 times. So that kind of gives us an idea of when, but it housed a system of where they could hold up to 50,000 people.
Mm-hmm. Now if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, was there? Joseph was not known as Joseph in this world, in the New World. He was known as Asenath.
So it would have had that name.
Yeah, because that was the name that Pharaoh gave to Joseph in the book of Genesis, Asenath Paneah, and from what I've read, the name Asenath was used quite a bit in the old archaeological records here, and especially associated with the Grand Canyon. By the way, just as an aside, I used some of this information in my first novel called the Anava Chronicles, which is called Light from the Crack. And so, having written this in novel form rather than as a documentary or something, I was able to use a lot of literary license to show some of these things. Just a little bit anyway, just a peek. So anyway, it just all adds to the mystery and the interest of the novel.
I've talked to people and told them about an Egyptian settlement over here, and they just have a real hard time believing it. Mm-hmm. But if you talk to the Hopi tribe, they have evidence that a tribe did exist. In fact, a lot of the words that they have are Egyptian. And that article that I was telling you about was in the Phoenix paper in 1905. It had pictures that very clearly showed the artifacts that they took out of there, and they were very clearly the same kind of Egyptian stuff that we would find over there. Hmm. And the pyramids from over there actually have corn and tobacco and things like that are indigenous to only that part of the world in Mexico and Arizona and stuff like that. So how did they get the corn over into the pyramids over there if nobody was able to come over here? So we had really a much greater place as far as travel, being able to navigate the world than what we have been told.
From what I understand, they could very well have come across the Mediterranean from Egypt, go past the Straits of Gibraltar, and instead of going north or directly across the ocean, they could have headed south a little ways and crossed over at about, and gone to Brazil, which is only probably not not as far as the length of the Mediterranean even. So if they could cross the Mediterranean without stopping, they could certainly come across to Brazil. And by the way, Brazil is actually a Hebrew word for iron. If you look it up in the Strong's Concordance, the BRZL is the spelling of the word for iron. So it's, and obviously there's iron, a lot of steel mills, there's a lot of exports, steel exports from Brazil. And so it's kind of interesting to me that there would be a Hebrew connection there, and makes you wonder who actually gave him that name. I don't know. I've never checked on the history of that, but it just seems like a real coincidence that they would have huge iron deposits in Brazil, and it would have the Hebrew name for iron there, like land of iron or something like that.
Yeah.
And so if they came to Brazil and then followed the coastline north, they could get all the way up into Mexico, and ultimately it's not that far in to the Grand Canyon from there. So,
and also, Jesus' uncle was Joseph of Arimathea. There's evidence that he had copper mines in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus also traveled with him when he was a teenager. And there's letters and other documents in Great Britain that says Jesus was there with Joseph teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was letters that went back and forth asking him questions and, making comments and stuff like that. So it is out there. You just have to do a little research.
Yeah, there are books, but they are downplayed, and in professional circles they try to discredit them. And I don't really know why. I mean, what's the big deal? But for some reason, they seem to be threatened by any idea that the New World was not so new after all, and that there were a lot of people from the Old World, as it were, who came across here long before Columbus. Well, we already know that the Vikings were here, especially in the north, the northeast. All these Indian names for the mountains and rivers and things like that are basically all Viking names. But in the Grand Canyon area and with the Hopis, there's more Egyptian influence than Viking. So obviously that's even older. So it appears that Joseph had a whole kingdom over here long before it was later rediscovered, and by the Europeans anyway. So it's kind of interesting to me that that we have a Joseph connection right here. And of course, I know a lot of the so-called what do you call them, mountains or pillars or whatever in the Grand Canyon. If you look closely, they're actually shaped, and they look like either pyramids or temples or something like that. In fact, they're named. I think there's one that's actually called some kind of a temple, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just because it has a resemblance to that. Well, who knows? Maybe erosion and earthquakes and all this kind of stuff have knocked a lot of it down and all this, but who's to say? Hopefully someday we'll get some actual honest archaeology in there that doesn't have an agenda, where they can actually look at it objectively and tell us what actually was going on.
In fact, there has been a lot of stuff on television lately by Expedition Unknown and Unearthed. Unearthed has a forensic geologist from Minneapolis right here that he's got some theories that he wants to try out, and he heard about the Grand Canyon situation, so he decided he's going to go investigate. And he went so far as to even find a helicopter, and they were gonna fly over there. But the helicopter pilot said, "We'll be stopped by the government." And he thought, well, that's kind of funny. You know, why would they do that? And she said, well, I'll take you as far as they'll let us. And so they made the trip, and this is all on video. It was on a show just not too long ago. Uh-huh. And sure enough, the government stopped them, and they can't get to down where the cave is. And he's done other segments in his series where he really feels like the people from other parts of the world have been over here, and we're just not allowed to, know about it. The Phoenicians, he has pegged at about 3,500 years ago, came over here. And the Phoenicians are known as Canaanites now in the Bible. And so they did a lot of exploration really all across the world.
Yeah, the problem, though, is that the actual Phoenicians were obviously a Canaanite tribe or something like that. At least they lived near Canaan. I'm not sure the exact origin. But from the Greek and Roman point of view, the Israelites were also Phoenicians. They just considered that whole area to be Phoenicia.
I see.
And so sometimes you don't always know what they're talking about because they lump them all into one basket. And obviously, if you study the scriptural record, you'll find that Solomon particularly made a covenant and was in alliance with the Phoenicians, with Hiram of Tyre, particularly to build the temple, if you remember. And but even before that, the tribe of Dan, which did not inherit most of its land because the Philistines were there in the plain, most of them just ended up going up to Tyre and Sidon and joining up with the Phoenicians and becoming sailors. And basically they colonized a good share of the colonies that are around the Mediterranean area, and who knows where else. They may have come to the New World as well. There seems to be evidence of that. But they would have come in the name of Phoenicia rather than of Israelites. But actually, the Phoenicians were the experts in navigation and the shipping, and transportation. But it seems that the Israelites formed the bulk of the population as far as their colonies were concerned. So it's just interesting little connections here that most people are unaware of. But these are things that I studied way back as early as the 70s, and I've never seen anything to contradict that ever since. So,
also, the Egyptians had giants in those days in the Grand Canyon, and there are mummies of giants in that cave. And a number of years ago, our military went down there in an expedition, and they did some excavation, and they took some of the giants out, and they took them to probably Area 51 and proceeded to collect DNA on them and try to make super soldiers. And I don't know how
weaponize
successful.
Everything, right?
Yeah. So that's where they've gotten that. And it might be one of the reasons why they've collected giants over the years and have been doing things unbeknownst to us. And, of course, the museums are owned by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and we all know nasty stuff about those guys. So the big thing is we just got to be open-minded enough to be able to accept that this has been going on for a long, long time, and there's been some deception that is out there to try to get us not to believe that those things exist. And if they do that, probably the reasoning behind that is not too good.
Well, we know Jesus said, there's nothing hidden that won't be revealed at some point.
Well,
everything will be uncovered.
It looks like it's starting.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, we should be prepared for these things, because if as these things are uncovered, it'd be kind of nice not to be shocked by it if we already have some knowledge of it, and then suddenly it's confirmed, even by the government, which would be interesting. Then we can be at least mentally and spiritually prepared for things that are being uncovered in these last days. So I think that would be a good idea to know. We need to know about these things, and of course, it explains Scripture. If giants were never mentioned in the Bible, then we could be a whole lot more skeptical. But as Christian believers, we believe that the Bible is an accurate and genuine written record. Then it's obvious that men like Og of Bashan, the king, who is 9-10 feet high, big long bed, probably 13 or 14 feet, just his bed. His bed was described. It must have been kind of famous back in the days of Moses. But it's obvious that giants did exist, and they're not invulnerable. They can be killed. Arrows and swords will kill a giant just as easily as anybody else. Well, maybe not just as easily. It takes a little bit more whacking to cut them down to size. But nonetheless, these things, this type of people have existed, and there's evidence that some of them are still in existence today. Because there's a lot of stories from many, many nations, especially where they have remote areas where you have some form of giants anyway.
There's a story told about Afghanistan, where a giant was killing our troops a number of years ago. And we finally took a platoon of very good soldiers in, and they were able to capture it. He was 15 feet tall. And they carted him on an airplane. And the pilot has, proceeded to talk about it and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it's something the government kind of denies exists, but every once in a while we run into a story like that, mm-hmm. where people were actually eyewitnesses and so on and so forth.
Yeah, those stories are actually online as well. And I think an artist's rendition of the giant himself, according to the description, is there as well. I don't think anyone was able to take any pictures, actual pictures, or if they did, those were confiscated, obviously. But yeah, it's very, very interesting to see some of these things. I've heard stories also about giants in the remote jungles of Mindanao in the Philippines, to say nothing of so-called Bigfoot and other things. That you hear every so often. Up in northern Minnesota, they found some fur on a barbed wire fence and sent it for analysis to the University of Minnesota, and they could not confirm what animal it was. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a cow. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't. They went through the whole thing, but the DNA was entirely different. And so that's still one of those mysteries that nobody's talking about, or if it gets put in the paper, it's not headline news. So anyway, these things are very interesting. But in regard to DNA and all of that kind of stuff, let's change the subject just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about stem cells.
Okay.
And, let me just preface this by saying that beginning Sunday, August 5th, is that Sunday or is that the 4th? That's the 4th.
I don't know.
My wife and I are going to be flying out of town. I guess I won't say exactly where, but my wife is going to be having some stem cell therapy on her hip. Some of you who are listening have seen her at some conferences, and she kind of limps around a little bit. And the orthopedist said she needs a hip replacement. And we decided that rather than do a hip replacement, let's see if we can do a hip rejuvenation. So anyway, so we're going to be out of town for a couple of weeks doing a health program, but the main thing is stem cell therapy. And so we've been researching stem cells for quite some time and have talked to people who have done this, seen some rather remarkable results, particularly with cancer. But it also seems to work on joints and degeneration and of other things like bones. And so, in fact, at the last conference in Charlotte, we talked to a world-renowned expert in this, who has been a scientist in this field of stem cell research for many years. He's retired now, but he's written books on the subject, and anyway, he was able to give us some suggestions as well, and to confirm what we had already researched and read in regard to stem cells. Now, the only thing is sometimes our stem cells, or the problem we have is that after we get to be about 30, the number of stem cells we get tends to go down, and then we start to age. And by the time you get to my age, we start to feel it a little bit more. Yeah, I just hate that when it happens.
Yeah.
And so anyway, sometimes we need a little help. There are stem cell products out there, one way or the other. But I think at this point, I'll just turn it over to you. What do you know about stem cells?
Well, I head up an organization of doctors that is an alternative way to go from the medical boards. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know you can do that, but it is possible, but it has to be private. And so I have a large percentage of them that do stem cell therapy. And we've been talking back and forth here for a number of years. And it's still in what the FDA calls the experimental stage. So they're still making up the rules and regs and all that kind of stuff. But overall, it seems to be worth doing if you got the money. And of course, insurance doesn't take care of it. So it leaves it up to the people that actually make enough money to where they can afford to do that. And we're talking usually from $5,000 to $10,000, $15,000 for a simple injection. And that's more money than probably 90% of us have. So there's been a lot of people looking around for what's the cheapy way to go that still gets results. And sometimes we do stem cell treatments and they don't work. And that's always a great disappointment. I had one stem cell treatment, and it did not work. So the thousands of dollars that I put into it was kind of considered a waste. And so I was one of those people that was starting to look at possibilities. And as some of you know, I had what they diagnosed as a stroke a few years ago. And it was a little bit not knowing what it was because they could not find any MRI evidence of a stroke having happened. The doctor came to me and he said, well, I know you had one because I saw the results and I know that was a stroke, but I can't find anything. Well, it was his business to find an accurate diagnosis, or they couldn't do the insurance payment because they wouldn't know how to bill it, and so on and so forth. So, when he asked me what I thought, I said, well, we prayed about about it, and maybe God's healed it already. He didn't like that answer too well, so went back to the original thing. So he found something that he could diagnose it as a stroke, so the insurance would go ahead and pay for it. But that kind of made me think a little more of what if there's something that's out there that's not so much known yet that we can get for $100 instead of $5,000, you know. Mm-hmm. And came across a product really through my doctor, who's a world-class naturopathic doctor. He has 2 Nobel Prizes and 3 PhDs. So he's on up there on the food chain of doctors. And he's also a pharmacologist. And so he knows all the drugs, what not to use, why not to use it, and so on and so forth. And he will go natural if he can. But he called me one day and he said, Tim, I found this product that you really need to get on. It is not a stem cell product, but it works with the stem cells and causing them to regenerate. And I've been kind of asked to help do the study to see what we can prove and show is working. He says, so I've got all my patients on it out here. He's out in California. And he said, everybody's getting really good results from using it. And it's under $100 a bottle for a month's supply. And so he said, you really need to start taking this. Well, you know, I would not have been able to do another $5,000 injection of even something that was guaranteed to work. And when he said I could get something for under $100, I could afford that. And I know a lot of people that could afford that too. And so he gave me the name of the guy and the phone number, which was in North Carolina, which is just south of where I am. So I took that and I called it later that afternoon. And when he answered the phone, he goes, hi, Tim. And I got, well, that's really a strange way to answer the phone, you know, somebody that you don't even know. But as it turns out, my name was in his phone index where I had talked to him about 10 years ago, and I bought some energy water products from him. And then I started going to Mexico so much I kind of lost track of him. But my number was still in his phone after all this time.
Amazing.
So I talked to him, and I said, I've been talking to Dr. Nelson, and he suggested I get this product. And, you know, one thing about this product is it's multi-level, and I just, you know, have pretty much had it with multi-level products because I get hit up every week about the latest, greatest everything, you know, and then it doesn't turn out to be much. And so I wasn't looking for another job opportunity. I just wanted some me time where I took care of myself for a change, because naturopaths are world famous for carrying everybody's burden for them, and then don't take care of ourselves because there's no time. So I decided this is going to be different. I'm going to take care of myself for a little while, which really is saying something, because for the last 15, 20 years, I have been on the road where I'm trying to put 5 weeks into 4, you know. I come home, change of clothes, and go out again. And just no time in between, relax, and so on and so forth. So that just wasn't me. But I decided it's about time I better do something, because I was really feeling terrible. So when I was talking to him, he said, well, I'll tell you what, I was just getting ready to take my wife to dinner. And I said, where are you going to dinner? And he said, Danville. We're going to run up there. Well, that happens to be my town. And I lived just a little bit to the north out in the boonies. And so we decided we'd meet, and he'd give me the product. I didn't have to wait for it to get there in a few days with the mail. And so in a half hour, I had my product. And I started taking it, that night, it was a Friday night and through the weekend, and it really had a good effect on me like right away, which most good products take months before you know whether it's working or not. You just have to have faith that it's going to do something. And so on Monday morning, I was getting ready to go to Nebraska. It was going to be my big trip out. And I called this guy to tell him I was coming, invite him to the meeting. And he said, "Dr. Tim, what have you been doing? You sound a lot better." And I had not really noticed myself. It takes somebody else that hasn't been talking to you every day to know that you're doing better. And I said, "Well, I'm taking this STEM product." And he said, "I want some of that." And I was not going to sell anybody. I was just going to take it myself, And so he signed up as a distributor. And I said, "Well, I'll help you. I'm not interested in selling myself, but I'll help you if you want." So for the first week, I just helped him with people, and he went and won the first award, which meant he was really doing good. And I made it to Nebraska in whiteout snowstorms where people kept canceling. So I wasn't making any money and actually feeling better. And, here I am turning my leads over to somebody else, and they're winning awards off of it. So the second week, I decided, well, I'm not making any money on meetings here with my energy products, so I'm going to see if I can't sell a few stems and get some people, enjoying the benefits that I do. So the second week, by the end of the second week, he and I both won the first 2 awards. And we were the first ones in the company to do it. And that was just getting busy on the phone. And, 4 or 5 people that I had talked with noticed the difference that I had. And so they just based on that, they got in. And one lady and her husband, they just don't do multi-level. And they know you, by the way. Mm-hmm. And they read the blog.
They know we don't do multi-level either.
Yeah. And nobody does, but they're in 3 of them at a time. That's what I found out.
The problem is some very good products are multi-level, and I hate that marketing, but it's sometimes it's a necessity.
Yeah. It really, my product is perfect for that kind of a thing because you have to have people telling people about it because it's not something you can just sit on the shelf and say it's got this energy in it, Mm-hmm. And but she and her husband just, they don't have the money and they didn't want to do it. And they've just shied away from it ever since I've known them for about the last 12 years or so. And I just felt like God wanted them to do it. They really needed something right now for some extra income, and they needed to make an exception. And so I called them and I said, I think you guys really need to do this and pray about it, and there will be a way. And so they called me back and they said, "We've decided to do it." And then they were the next couple that did the 2 awards, and they've been doing very, very good ever since.
Good.
So it seems like the best people are the ones that don't like multi-level and don't want to do it. But they just right the situation.
There have to be millions of burned out multi-level people out there. Yeah. Well, tell us how exactly does this product work? It's obviously not where you're taking stem cells internally. What does it do?
What it is, it's a product made from chicken eggs at the 9th day. What scientists have discovered is on the 9th day, the growth factor in the chicken egg is at its highest potential. And it causes stem cells to reproduce. And, like people my age, we're producing about 5% of the stem cells that we used to when we were kids. And that's not very much. And that's what's causing us to age. So if we can get even a few percent more, that can be just enough to really provide a healing or regeneration of something.
So this enhances your own stem cells.
Right.
Activates them? How can we? What's the term to use?
Well, I think activate would be be one of the best terms to use.
So that they will reproduce themselves.
Right.
Okay.
And that's better than taking in stem cells from somebody else, because there's a way to do a placenta.
Yeah, the placenta is overloaded with stem cells, obviously with the production of a baby. And by the way, just briefly for those that never heard of stem cells, a stem cell isn't a stem on a plant. A stem cell is. Well, perhaps you ought to tell them what a stem cell is. I'm not the expert on.
Well, I'm not either.
Health matters.
But what it does, it has the ingredients, the peptides and things like that, in the albumin of the egg that when you take it, it commingles with the cell, with the stem cell, and causes it to reproduce and make more.
A stem cell can turn into virtually any type of
anything
cell
you need
that you need as an organ. Stem cells are basically what build babies, don't they?
Yeah.
And the same kind of stem cell will turn into a brain cell or a liver cell or a heart cell or a skin cell or an eyeball or whatever the case is, depending upon what it's needed.
And we've had many people who have been taking it for one thing and noticing their hair is going back to its original color. The gray's going away. My doctor...
There's hope for me?
No.
Maybe not. I'm too far gone, right?
I don't know. But my own doctor, in 3 weeks of taking it, he said his old football knee injury went away.
Interesting.
And that's just something he thought he had to put up with. Now he's thinking he's 70 years old and thinking he can go play for the Packers again, So...
maybe I could go play for the Packers again.
Well, that'd be... there's a day that I dreamed of that, but that's
be
long gone too.
Backpackers, maybe.
Yeah. So...
Yeah.
He's also noticed his vision's clearing up. He doesn't need his glasses anymore. Strange little things like that. When we take this, we're taking it usually for one specific reason. And what the body does, it has a priority in its healing. And what we think of as number one thing, might only be 4 on the list. And it's got some stuff before that it wants to do some work on. So we have to be a little bit patient sometimes because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Do you think maybe that's what happened when you had the stem cell treatment? Do you think?
I don't know.
It could have gone to some other things.
Some of the critical people of stem cells say that they might have died in the freezing process already or things like that. Might have been around a little too long. Don't know. But I know that we have a lot of doctors that are using this now instead of stem cells, and they like having a result almost every time, where the other times they were getting about 50%, which is great, but it's terrible if you're on the wrong side of the fence on that. So I think if you're going to do stem cells, you should do both at the same time. That way you'll be, it doesn't hurt to have the feeling a little better right after the fact, and getting some good results along with that.
So, to apply it to my wife, who is going to be getting stem cell therapy next week. They'll be taking it. You can get stem cells from a number of sources. The ideal is obviously to use your own stem cells, and this particular place takes it from bone marrow, and then treats it in some way, and then implants it into the area. In her case, it'd be right into the hip joint, I presume. I've never experienced it or seen it done yet, but if we have a product like what you have, which maybe we can show it up here, STEM, and we'll have some information down below the video as well. That could perhaps enhance whatever they do to make it work better, I would think.
Yeah, I think they work synergistically together. And from the results of our research that we've done, we've concluded that we think that the best type of stem cell treatment is using your own stem cells. And what they do, they have a way of taking that, and they can't do it here in this country, so it has to be shipped offshore right now. And we're working with one of the doctors to possibly have a lab put in on Indian land, which would be offshore. And we haven't made the deal yet, but we're looking at a few places. So they can then take those stem cells and they can actually do a process which will expand that exponentially. So it'll really be a lot more than what you generally would have. And that's a treatment that now I think has moved into the number one spot with stem cells.
Yeah, there's still a lot of research going on with stem cells. It's pretty young yet, and so they're still working with it. But there's apparently a lot that we can do in relation to health. I do know some folks that have had stem cell therapy for cancer, not for the hip, with very, very good results. And in fact, that's where we got the name of this particular clinic. You might say offshore, because they don't. Unfortunately, the medical regulations in this country are too much controlled by big pharma, who does not like competition at all, and so they tend to persecute anybody and run them off into another country. So, usually you have to end up.
So all the stem cell people are wanting to leave and become aliens. So
yeah.
It's kind of a, I saw this cartoon one time where the rapture happened, and all the people left behind in the church, the dead churches, went across the street to the bar, and all the people in the bar went across the street to the church. So it's kind of like that.
I thought you might say that they all got to the gate of St. Peter and they didn't have any immigration papers to get in.
Yeah, they run a tighter ship than we do here.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, okay. Anything else before we wrap this up?
I can't think of anything other than if this is a product that you think you would be interested in, you can give me a call. Be happy to get you set up.
Okay.
So
well, we'll put.
How do we want to do that?
We'll put information down below the video if people want
Okay.
If people are interested in inquiring further or signing up to get it on a monthly auto ship or whatever the case is. And I'll say I have been getting auto ship now for a few months as well, because I believe in the stem cell thing. We've done plenty of research on it, and so we haven't noticed any dramatic effects at this point. But then that could be for a number of reasons. First of all, we don't we don't really have a chronic condition. My wife has the hip problem, but to our knowledge, that hasn't been affected, to be honest. But at the same time, I know that if you can enhance your stem cells, you're going to have an overall general improvement on health, just because we're at the age, too, where we might be down to 5 or 4% or 3.5% or whatever it is. And for that reason, our body can't keep us young anymore. And so I'm always interested in doing that, because it'd be nice to live a little bit longer to get another commentary out, before the second coming of Christ or the end of the world or whatever people believe on that. Anyway, okay, so
they have other products too. I didn't show any of them, but they're even now. They've just recently signed an agreement with us where they're taking 3 of our products, our energy products, and they've added them into the line. And so there's some interesting things that people are noticing with our products that is going to give us a new way to market and so on and so forth. So one of those things that I don't have to go out quite as much, and we'll have another source.
So I take it that your energy products would enhance the enhancement of the stem cells and things like that. So that's still young. They're still experimenting with that, I suppose.
We've had a lady report that she used our product on her foot where the doctor diagnosed her with MRSA, which is really something they don't have a cure for.
Yeah, isn't that a bacteria or something? It's deadly.
It's a deadly bacteria that is hospital generated.
Yeah, it originates in hospitals, basically, which are disease centers.
Yeah. So try to stay out of those places if you can.
Yeah. Everybody gets quarantined in a hospital, and it's not always the best place. Yeah.
So she, in 3 weeks, it was gone, and she went to the doctor, and he said, "Don't take our product anymore. Just do what you're doing." And she was very excited about that. And then I worked with her on something else yesterday, and she had the pain go away from that in just a few minutes. And this is over the phone. She lives in New Mexico. So there's things we can do with the energy products that we can't do with anything else.
Yeah, because with energy, as with anything in the area of quantum, you're not limited, or you don't have to be right there. It's like being in the spirit, where there's no time nor distance. In this case, particular distance. Yeah. You can work with people directly over the phone. Yeah, I've seen that too. So that's quite interesting. And of course, everybody knows who's prayed for somebody for healing. You don't have to be right there all the time necessarily. You can. That's
one of the things we say if we want to get them to think a little differently, because there are still people in the church that think that kind of thing is just a little bit too works too well for God to do it. Yeah, I guess they put more trust in the devil at that point. But we do have some people that think that's just a little bit too woo-woo for them, you know. So it's not as bad as it was 20 years ago, but there's still a few people out there that kind of wonder about stuff like that.
Yeah, virtually anything that is truly spiritual is a bit woo-woo, you know. And I don't know. I guess I'm one that I'm willing to try anything, and I know that this three-dimensional world here is not all of reality. It may be only a very tiny fraction of reality. And so, but anyway.
Well, like acupuncture has only been accepted the last few years by the FDA. It had to be proven to them, and that's something that's been around for 5,000 years. And there's Chinese doctors, acupuncturists that are able to do a few points, and they don't need antibiotics. They don't need anything to deaden the pain or anything else. just something they go ahead and have an operation using the acupuncture.
Instead of anesthesia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Never
I don't know that I would let an American do it to me, but
yeah. They need to be skilled, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be cut open and then suddenly, hey, it's stopped working.
Hurts.
Yeah, this hurts. Yeah. Well, okay. I think we've gone a little past an hour here, or pretty close to it, and so I think that'll be about enough for now. So we appreciate you coming, and
thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's been really good. We are always interested in health matters, especially from a Christian point of view, a biblical point of view, because obviously we believe that God created the human body, and so He knows what's going on with it, and there's a whole lot more to it than most people realize. So health is important because without health, you're pretty much handicapped in what you can do for the kingdom. So we want everybody to be in as good health as possible so that they can be productive citizens of the kingdom and be part of the building process.
We got to get healthy so we can run from the giants,
That's right. That's right. So you got to be able to outrun them, or at least outrun your neighbor.
Or learn how to throw rocks, one of the two. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then we'll close this off for now, and we'll see you all later.